Attention! The master of Rengeho's hermitage held out his staff and said to his disciples, "When in olden times a man reached the state of enlightenment, why did he not remain there?" No one could answer, and he answered for them, because it is no use in the course of life. And again he asked, "After all, what will you do with it?" And once again he said in their stead, taking no notice of others, throwing his staff over his shoulder, he goes straight ahead and journeys deep into the recesses of the 100,000 mountains. Secho's verse. His eyes filled with sand, his ears with clay, even among the 1,000 mountains he does not remain. Falling blossoms, flowing streams, he leaves no trace. Open your eyes wide and you'll wonder where he has gone. Welcome, everyone. So, one of the wonderful things I think I've experienced, I'm sure we all have, about Zen practice is it appears to be a practice about attaining some sort of peace, tranquility, serenity. And yet, it's also a practice that gives you no peace in the pursuit of peace. It's always pushing, prodding, asking you the awkward question. Who are you? Who are you really? Do you really know who you are? And even if you answer that question or experience it fully, then to keep going. I often think of the title of a book by Jack Cornfield which says, "After the ecstasy, the laundry." You know, after Nirvana, Asda. Is it? You've still got to keep going somehow. So a lot of the teaching tells us that the address of our lives, to borrow a quote, from a Zen teacher, the address of our lives is the intersection of here and now, a bit like the intersection of Main Street and 43rd Street. Here and now, this place, on the mat, on the cushion. And yet, of course, we know our experiences that we spend a lot of our lives not in the here and now, but in the there and then. And it's interesting that many the koans we study are very much about there and then. In fact, they're often about long, long ago and far away, maybe in ancient China or Japan. One of the things that struck me straight away about this koan, I hope you've had a chance to have a look at it, is that I didn't think much of his disciples. They don't seem to have anything much to say. And I think one of the commentaries, there are many commentaries on these koans, of course. One of the commentaries actually says that there is a different way of looking at this, that maybe it isn't that they didn't know the answer. But Rengeho, the master of Rengeho, apparently asked this question for 20 years and never got a satisfactory answer. So you really need to think about your disciples if 20 years on none of them can... Something's not working somewhere. So anyway, with a little bit of poetic license, I checked this out with Sensei, if I could just do this. What I wanted to do is just colour it a little bit, because there's some things about this koan that give a slightly different picture. It says straight away that Master of Rengeho was a hermit. This was a hermitage. He didn't have many disciples. And the hermitage, the place where he chose to live, was Rengeho, which actually translates as Lotus Flower Peak. So in a very clear sense, it's very much a symbol of enlightenment, possibly a place of pilgrimage of that time. And here you've got a hermit who sees approaching monks, and I can only imagine on this place of pilgrimage where you've got these hermitages around the mountain, that he sees an approaching monk who's coming looking for the big E, the big experience on the mountain, and here's this wild-eyed old hermit jumping out and saying, holding up his staff and saying, well, he could say a number of things. He might say, "Who are you? What are you doing here? What is your purpose? Have you come here to polish tile?" Of course, he didn't say any of those things, but he could have done. I just want to share this with you. I guess many people are aware that we just had a month-long training period in the lakes at Stonewater at Sensei's cottage. So here's a picture of Rengeho's cottage. And this was a little sketch that Jane put together very briefly while we were there. So we spent 4 weeks there. Lots of different people came and went. So if anybody's going to ask, where is Rengeho's cottage? That's one possible answer. Go to Butterwick. Okay, so in a sense, Rengeho is, you might think of him as a guardian. He seems to be issuing some sort of health warning almost, you know, a cautionary no. He says, this thing called enlightenment, even the old masters, the people who practice in olden times, never stayed here. He says here, like it's a place. He sets this up quite deliberately. A state of enlightenment. Why did they not remain here? And then quite astonishingly, he actually says, which seems to contradict a lot of the teachings of Buddhism in many ways, apparently, he says, it's no use. You can't do anything with it. So his question is, why are you pursuing this? Why are you pursuing this state? What would you do with it? A few years ago, it's something that really stuck in my mind that a fellow student from Aberystwyth, in the middle of a talk, said, this word enlightenment in English is such a deeply, deeply unhelpful word. It sort of suggests some sort of almost transcendental, miraculous power, some light coming down, you know, like the almost like the lottery, you know, it's you. Oh, right. And from that point onwards, of course, life is perfect, clarified, and no worries. So, just to sort of balance that, I think it's always useful for me to bear in mind that the story of the Buddha's enlightenment or his awakening, and we know that in the languages of the time that the root of Buddha meant awakened or awake. So when the Buddha had reached that state, there was a passing, in various stories, sometimes it's said to be a student, but it seems to be a passing Brahmin, a Hindu priest, who saw the Buddha and noticed something about his appearance and said, "Are you a god?" The Buddha said, "No." "Are you a demigod?" "No." "Are you a teacher?" "No." "Are you a healer?" "No." "Well, what are you?" And the Buddha said, as I'm sure you all know, I am awake. I am awake. Well, I sort of say, awake to what? We're all awake today. I feel very awake this afternoon. Awake to thusness, or suchness, such as it isness, the way it really is, without delusion. Just one other small thing about the Buddha, when he achieved this state, he also had a period of doubt when he thought it would probably be a teaching that would be impossible to transmit. He thought it would be beyond him to actually put this very subtle teaching into a form that people could access. And he thought that maybe the best thing was to enter parinirvana, or in a sense to die, rather than to be burdened with enlightening all sentient beings. Anyway, so he says, I am awake. Now, going back to the hermit, what he's saying is, what use is that? If you wake up tomorrow and you have a really good night's sleep, and you wake up in the morning, you feel full of the joys of September, what are you going to do with it? You're going to run down Hope Street shouting, I am awake, I am alive, follow me, and you too can wake up? I don't think it'd be very long before either somebody had arrested you or certainly suggested maybe you needed to sit down or something, or maybe go back to sleep. So in that sense, what the hermit is saying is, what can you actually do? What use is it, being awake, being enlightened? What are you going to do with it? Well, I don't know about you, but the first thing I do when I wake up is get a cup of tea. And then, other things follow. So that there's a real sense in which that state of awakening is not helpful to others to point out how awake I am and how helpful it would be if you woke up. That isn't how it's transmitted. It's transmitted in the way we are, in the way the Buddha taught, in the way he had a presence in the world, in the way he was. And I know for myself, what impresses me most about teachers is the way they are. That's where the teaching comes through. It's the way they are, their presence in the world. It's not necessarily, it's helpful what they say, like a finger pointing at the movement. It is helpful, but much more profound is the way they are in the world. So when you're fully awake, there is a certain presence that transmits. That might just be something as simple as the way you make a cup of tea, or if you've had your breakfast, that you wash your bowl afterwards. So that's what he seems to be doing. He seems to be telling these monks who are approaching is, don't think you're going to come here and sit on your backside. What are you going to do with it? Where are you going to go? In the verse in the koan, he says he still didn't get an answer from his monks, but I hope you can see the way I've coloured it slightly, that what I'm seeing is these monks are approaching the mountain and he's challenging them to say, what is it you think you're going to get here? Even the olden folks didn't say here, you're going to go on. So in the verse he says, taking no notice of others, throwing his staff over his shoulder, he goes straight ahead and journeys deep into the recesses of the 100,000 mountains. I love the commentary ascribed to Hakuin, in which he says, what is the absent-minded old guy blabbering on about? Which often when you see a koan for the first time is, I'm sure all of us have of something like that. What is this about? You know. But a bit like poetry, its meaning has to be digested over time. So, taking no notice of others, in a sense, for me, could be at least two things. One is not getting too bogged down in the literal teachings of the sutras, because they're obviously they're helpful, they're a guide, they're the essence of the teaching, but in actual fact it's how life is lived, how the life is lived, and how the life has been lived through generations of masters and teachers. Another way, taking no notice of others, is not taking too much attention to the constant voices. You know, that when we first sit Zazen, we immediately become aware, and when people first come to practice, they immediately become aware of just how busy this mind is. The mind that has a mind of its own, that doesn't want to sit, wants to leave, wants to do something else, doesn't want to sit here and be still. It doesn't do that. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to deal with that's a constant chatter. And it may be critical stuff, you know, it may be you're no good, you shouldn't be here. Can be very critical voices, or it could be just you don't know what you're talking about. In fact, there's a little voice already saying that to me right now. Who are you? What are you doing here? It's the guy in the seat there we should be listening to, not you. Anyway, so taking no notice of others, but it sort of touches on a little story. There was another koan about Master Suigen, which just happens to be my Dharma name. And Master Suigen, I love this, would sit in the morning and he would say to himself, "Master, are you in?" And he would say, "Yes." "Are you fully awake?" "Yes, sir." And finally, "Do not ever be deceived by others." "No, I won't." And that's how he starts his day. So Suigen reminds himself, there's quite a long story attached to why he has that exchange in the morning. But it seems a very sort of sensible way of saying, don't be deluded. Don't be deluded by the constant chatter, by the constant self-critical voices sometimes that we have to deal with. Because that isn't what it's about. When we open the door to those never-ending voices, what I experience, and I'm sure what you do, is they're never-ending. You know, you open up that door and you see a bottomless well of critical voices, etc., stretching off down Hope Street, right down to the pier head, back. You know, there's a long list of people who want to come and say, well, you know, what do you know? So that's Suigen's point about remaining fully awake. So back to the koan. He says, throwing his staff over his shoulder, he goes straight ahead. What does that mean? Throwing his staff over his shoulder, he goes straight ahead and journeys. To me, it sounds like the staff here is a symbol of Zen mind, or direct mind. It's often used in, this isn't the only koan it's used in, where the master holds up his staff. So the staff also is used by monks, other people, for walking along, you know, as a support. But he's not using his enlightenment as a support. He's not saying I'm dependent on this. He's sort of, in a sense, casually throwing it over his shoulder. And I assume by that he means throwing it over his shoulder like this, not like that. Although maybe both would be okay. But he's not wearing it as a badge. He's not coming out and saying, I am the enlightened one, listen to me. He's actually saying, in a way, he's saying, if you're going to learn anything from my enlightenment, it'll be just in the way that I am, the way I move and the way I am around people, the way I do things. So throwing it over his shoulders and carrying it lightly, But nonetheless, he goes straight ahead. So this thing, he's carrying it lightly, but he goes straight ahead. He doesn't waver. He doesn't say, should I do this? Should I do that? Maybe I'll stay here. Maybe I'll go. No, he goes, with his Zen mind, he goes straight ahead. And where does he go? He goes deep into the recesses of the 100,000 mountains. Now, what does that mean? The 100,000 sounds very much like the 10,000 things that we talk about in the world of the everyday world. The 10,000 things are everything, all this. So the 100,000 mountains are, it seemed in one sense, is every aspect of our life. Every aspect of our life so far, every aspect to come. Constant challenges, constant places. You know, the hermit actually sets up a trap in a sense. He says enlightenment is a state. Why did they not remain here? It's almost like he's saying enlightenment is like the celestial city. So why would you bother going from such a beautiful place deep into those mountains? And when we were at the Lake District in the last 4 weeks, a couple of people have said, we went towards Keswick and that sort of area, said, you know how the mountains just sort of fade into the distance in colours into the distance, so they go on and on. Why would you go when you're already there? Apparently, enlightenment, you know, this wonderful place. He says he goes deep into the recesses. In other words, to me, the difficult places, the out of the way places, everywhere. He doesn't stop. He doesn't even stop there. He carries on. He carries on and appreciates every aspect of his life, of your life, my life. You know, every aspect of the great life he fully explores. He doesn't sit on his butt and say, I am enlightened. Because it's not helpful. In fact, he says it very clearly. What use is it? Why would you do that? Okay. But just go on to Secho's verse. I haven't got much more to say really about it, but Secho's verse sort of clarifies it in a way. His eyes filled with sand, his ears with clay. Different translations of this are more and less helpful. Another translation is his eyes filled with sand, his ears filled with dust. Now that immediately sort of suggests to me that even on a very difficult road where we don't know quite where ahead is, because we're blinded by so many distracting things, we can't hear because there's dust, clay in our ears, or we might have chosen to block it out. But we're not dependent on that seeing and hearing. We have a faith in the route we're taking, going straight ahead into the mountains, that the route, the path that we've chosen will support us, will sustain us. So even among the 1,000 mountains, he doesn't remain. He doesn't remain anywhere. Practice, to use another phrase, the practice of non-abiding, we continue straight ahead. We don't remain anywhere. Falling blossoms, flowing streams, he leaves no trace. So, you know, life is continuously moving around us. People are being born and die, get ill. The whole thing is changing all the time, and we can't stop it. We're right at the centre of it. But in the middle of that, the practitioner goes straight ahead. He leaves no trace. He doesn't become attached to any particular point of view about himself, about others, even about enlightenment. He leaves it behind. He goes forward. And the final, he goes forward because that practice is about appreciating every aspect of life. So in a sense, the journey becomes more important than the arriving. The actual process of being alive is continuing the journey. And finally, he says, Secho's verses says, open your eyes wide and you'll wonder where he has gone. Well, what does that mean? Open your eyes wide seems to be awake, waking up to the way things are, waking up to the way we create suffering for ourselves and for other people by believing that there's a separation between me and the rest of the world. And even at a very basic physical level, that sense of separation that I am here, who am I? In case anybody's going to ask the question, who am I? Well, I'm here, okay? I'm in this body here, somewhere residing behind this face, maybe, is a sense of it. And everything else is out there. I'm here and out there, but immediately there's a problem. What's this? What is that? Is that out there or in here? It seems to be a bit of both. A hand that you can see, and a foot, or any part of it. So even at a physical level, the idea that I am here and the rest of the universe is out there, even at that very basic level, immediately breaks down. Apparently, we can be one and the same at the same time. So, recognizing that there is no separation, ultimately, it just feels like it is. It just feels like I am separate for everything else and I've got to look out. I've got to look out for the things I like and the things I don't like, and that's how I live my life. Well, this path actually teaches you that that's an upside-down way of looking at the world. And it doesn't work. It creates suffering for ourselves and for other people. So that's open your eyes wide, and you'll wonder where he has gone. If you open your eyes wide and were fully awake, you will wonder ultimately where you have gone and where I have gone. I just want to add one final thing from my experience of being in the lakes, which was a wonderful time and great to have so many people involved with it. I sort of thought it was a great opportunity to go running, and I was doing that virtually every day over the fells, into 100,000 mountains. And I was running along this farm track one day, and I saw the farmer up ahead sort of corralling some sheep into the farmyard. And except that as I ran closer, I realised that this was either a very, very small farmer or it was a boy. It was actually a boy of about maybe 9, 10 years old. But he got a flat hat on, like the Cumbrian farmers. Got a jacket, he got Wellingtons. And as I approached, he said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, actually," I said, yeah. Are you?" He said, "Aye, grand. Ta-da." This young man, what struck me about it straight away was he was embodying a way of life in that place, possibly in that farm that had been there for generations. And he was just naturally who he was, looked straight in the eye and said, "You all right?" "You don't look all right," I think was what he... I'm a casualty here any minute. So anyway, embodying a way of life, a way of being, which he'd obviously learnt from his family and had probably been going on, in these places, the remote places, you don't know how many generations have actually lived in those places and passed that sense of being in the world down. And to me, the essence of the koan and of the practice that we share is that it's not just learning about a meditation practice, important though that is. It is ultimately, it's learning a way of being in the world with ourselves and with each other and with the world generally in a way that lessens the amount of suffering that's created. There is a verse about this case, and I've requested Taizan to recite it. His eyes filled with
with sand, his ears with clay, even among the 1,000 mountains, he does not remain. Falling blossoms, flowing streams, he leaves no trace. Open your eyes wide and you'll wonder where he's gone. His eyes filled with sand, his ears with clay, even among the 1,000 mountains, he does not remain. Falling blossoms, flowing streams, he leaves no trace. Open your eyes wide and you'll wonder where he's gone. His eyes filled with sand, his ears with clay, even among the 1,000 mountains, he does not remain. Falling blossoms, flowing streams, he leaves no trace. Open your eyes wide and you'll wonder where he's gone. His eyes filled with sand, his ears with clay, even among the 1,000 mountains, he does not remain. Falling blossoms, flowing streams, he leaves no trace. Open your eyes wide and you'll wonder where he's gone. His eyes filled with sand, his is with clay, even among the 1,000 mountains, he does not remain. Falling blossoms, flowing streams, he leaves no trace. Open your eyes wide and you'll wonder where he's gone. His eyes filled with sand, his ears with clay, the inexhaustible lion's roar.
How will you use this Shabbat?
Freely, giving life and taking it away.